It's draft day, and the Pacers made a trade. It's been quite the 12 hours in Pacerland. Richard Stayman from our Locked On NBA Big Board show is going to join us today. We're going to talk about the Pacers trade. We're going to talk about draft day, where the key moments in the drafts could be, the pivot points, and everything that affects the Pacers. It's all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today it is officially draft day. Was excited to preview the draft on today's episode with Richard Stayman from our Locked On NBA Big Board show. He will be at the draft tonight. Really wanted to get his thoughts on everything, where the pivot points were, where the Pacers need to be watching for other stuff that could happen, where they could move up into the middle of the draft, all sorts of stuff. And then about 45 minutes before we were set to record, bang, the trade happens. Pacers and Nuggets agreed to a deal. At the time of us talking, it was still unclear about what the trade officially was, but my reporting did turn out to be correct. The Pacers trade with the Nuggets. They give up pick 29 and 32. They get back pick 40 and then a 2024 pick in the first round from the Thunder, but it's not the Thunder's first. It could be. It'll be the worst of the Clippers, Thunder, Jazz, and Rockets first with some protection. So we break down that trade a little bit and the 2024 draft. All sorts of stuff. It wasn't a long discussion on the trade, but we get into it for about 6 minutes before talking draft. This intro has been too long. Let's just jump into the conversation. Draft day. Drake has a song about this. We will not be singing it today. Instead, talking about the draft in general. And the Pacers have made a trade less than an hour before this recording, with some reporting coming in as we're talking. But we'll break down this Pacers trade, pivot points in the first round, trade spots, all the big stuff you need to know ahead of the Pacers draft tomorrow. Mavs draft is back for his second appearance in this pre-draft cycle. He's Richard Stayman. Richard, you'll be at the draft. How pumped are you to see it all in action?
Hey, I'm excited to be back. I know we linked up at the Combine last month, and I think this is my second appearance in 2 weeks. So excited for what the Pacers can do. Obviously, I think both of us know Pacers are going to have a busy draft night. Forgive me for that slam. I guess actually you could call that a metaphor for if you want. So it could have been staged completely, but no, I think they will have a busy draft night.
Good Lord. If I'm adding staged sound effects into podcasts, I've taken this a little too far, right?
Hey, Locked On Mavs does it.
That's right. Nick's the king of the soundboard. So before Richard and I had planned, or after Richard and I had planned this before we started recording, reporting coming in, Pacers are making a trade, as many expected they would, because they have too many picks this year. As the time of me talking, there's a little unclarity, but I will stick to my own reporting here. The trade is Pacers trading 29, the pick they got from the Celtics in the Brogdon trade, and 32, a second rounder they got from the Rockets in the Depot trade years ago, to the Denver Nuggets for pick 40 this year. So moving back 8 spots in the second round. And then they're getting a 2024 first rounder from Denver. I believe that pick is the worst of the Thunder's first, the Jazz first, the Rockets first, and I'm missing a team in there, the Clippers first. So, Clippers, Thunder could certainly make the postseason next year. But I don't think any of them will have a top, I don't know, pick your number, 6-5 record. So perhaps that pick's like 24 at the, maybe the Clippers are amazing. I don't know. But, in the worst case scenario where that pick's 30, yeah, the Pacers maybe lose a little value here, but a 2024 pick by default has more value to them than a 2023 pick because they can't fit 5 rookies into their team. And ESPN is reporting that Denver's first is in this. If that's wrong, I'll, of course, issue a note on Twitter because I tweeted not the case. Either way, though, Denver having a top 2 record, also maybe not likely. They had the 4th best record this year despite winning the championship. So Pacers taking a little bit of a gamble that this worst of pick next year will be better than 29, but it seems exceedingly likely that it will be, even if Denver's is involved. So they get better equity for themselves and move back a little this year. I think that's a good trade for their situation, even though it's not like this really sexy thing that fans always love.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that trade is going to have a lot of it's like the beginning of the domino, right? Because if you look at just the second round and really like 25 through 45, I think is where it really starts, where it takes one and all of a sudden you see, oh, this pick's been traded, pick's been traded, pick's been traded. And for Indiana, I don't think they can't take on that many rookies. I think that's something to be considered. And also next year's draft, like, isn't that strong. They could probably just trade that again. If they wanted to, at the worst case, they could just go, all right, we'll just take a 2025 pick instead and just keep hedging that a little bit and just saying, hey, we'll just keep moving it back until we find value with it. And at the minimum also, like I'm very much a draft picks matter more in principle in trade than the actual like it's one of those things, right? Once you, it's like a new car, you get it, you get assigned to it, 25% of value immediately gone. And I think that's kind of the thing where it's like, all right, you can have the number 10 pick or have the name to it. Like if for the Mavs, for example, like if Derek Lively or the number 10 pick, I think a lot of teams would rather have traded for the number 10 pick just before it became the number 10 pick, right? Or like before draft night. So that stuff, Indiana can go a lot of different ways here.
Yeah, and if they get a 2024 pick from someone else, they can then trade their own and not worry about the Stepien rule and still have all these fun, fancy options involved. And it's just good balancing of their assets, right? They can't make 5 picks. Like, it's not a secret at all this year. It's been like maybe the most hotly reported thing in the draft that 26, 29, and 32 could be moved. And it might even be easier. Like, I've heard this theory, and perhaps by the time this is out, I have to completely change this first segment if they make another trade. But trading up from 26, let's say they wanted to use assets to do that. It might be easier with a 2024 pick than 29, just because teams would do exactly what you just said, where they know the slot versus the uncertainty. So I wouldn't rule out anything from this. I think it's good balancing, like I said, and I think it's a good way for them to keep their assets in order and down the line. I actually suggested this on a show earlier this week, not this specifically, but something like this earlier this week, and still lets them accomplish any of the stuff that they might want to do. So, yeah, it's a fascinating trade for the Pacers that seems a little minor, but given their situation, is pretty smart business.
Yeah, and I mean, also just looking at this draft, there's a lot of different value picks they could get to, and like going back in the draft, I think, I mean, somewhere in between that 32nd and 55th pick that they had prior, I do think there are paths to that upgrade.
Yep. So we'll see where this goes. I mean, maybe now another thing for the Pacers too is 40 instead of 32. In theory, 40 could end up on a two-way. 32 definitely wouldn't. So for their roster spot crunch, maybe that's something. I don't know if they'll even pick at 40 or 55. But in general, I like this move for the Pacers just alone from a balancing perspective. I think that's smart. And we'll see what else it allows them to do. I don't have a lot of big takeaways. I mean, the players you would still scout from 26 to 40 are pretty similar to 26 to 32. So from a player perspective, I don't have a lot to say here. I guess the 2024 draft is considered to be worse than this year's, but after the top, 15, the odds of getting a successful pick are basically the same in every draft. So I don't know if you have any other big takeaways from this, but I just think it's good asset balancing from the Pacers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what I'd been told at the combine was that the Pacers would be very interested in moving some of those picks. I'd heard they were going to sell outright one of 26, 29, or 32. So getting something back is a big win.
I agree. I don't have a lot else on this. And if you're hearing this, that means nothing else happened between now and the time that this episode comes out, because this stuff can all happen at a crazy speed the day before the draft. But if you're listening, it's the day of the draft, and all the intrigue, of course, for the Pacers will be on that 7th pick, Richard. A lot of people have a top 9, top 8 that they like. There's a tier from pick your spot 4 or 5, 6 through 8 or 9. The Pacers are firmly in that. There's been some reporting about other teams maybe wanting to move around in that tier. But yesterday I talked about the biggest Pacers draft questions with Derek Kramer. Today I want to talk to you. You cover the whole draft about the top 10 in general, because for a while it felt like people were viewing 4 as kind of a pivot point. I kind of view it as 5 based on some stuff I've heard, but I don't know what the Pistons are thinking. Either way, I suppose it's possible it's anywhere in the top 10, just given what we've heard leading up to this. But where do you view as kind of the biggest pivot point for where things could change, or where this could go off the rails, or where teams need to be prepared to change their board inside the top 10?
Yeah, I think 5 is really where the draft begins. I'm pretty confident the top 4 picks will be in some order: Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller, and Amen Thompson. After that, it could go any one direction. I don't think it'll be a Star Thompson at 5. Pretty confident it won't be Cam Whitmore anymore. There's a reason Draft Express has Cam falling, and I think it's pretty easy to see why. But I think Anthony Black could be in play. It'd be really weird with all the guards, though. I don't think they do that. If I had to guess, Detroit does one of two things: they trade or they take outright Taylor Hendricks or Jarris Walker, who are both players Indiana's targeting.
Hey guys, quick little break here to talk to you about Birddogs, who crush it, making you look good with the best shorts you could ever want. Their stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg to give you a truly sculpted look. I have 2 pairs. I wore one all around New York last weekend. It was fantastic. And their shorts do the same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit better because they're made of a stiff, restricting cotton that makes you look fantastic. And they have their own cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches, so you get that way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. And Birddogs uses an anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that makes you cool and dry all day long. I absolutely love them. My gray pair is fantastic. My light blue pair of the 7-inch inseams is fantastic. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. When you order from Birddogs, you'll get a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order if you go to that link. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. Try them out today. Yeah, I think you're right with all that as well. And, it's so interesting that the thing that's going to make this top 10 fascinating to me is you could say Houston, even like teams 4, 5, 6, 7 all want to be a lot better next year, right? So if they don't love anybody, or if things start to shake a little differently than was maybe previously expected leading up to the draft, I wonder how that would influence how these teams think about movement or assets or trading up or out, because there has been reporting about the Pacers wanting a starting caliber wing for their pick. I don't know that they will or won't do that, but that means, even if there is an expected order or teams like players, like you said, I think it's possible for, a team that really wants to move up to make something happen. Like if Utah really loves Anthony Black, like has been reported, or something, or there's just a lot that could go on there. And the other backdrop is, and I've said this a few times on local radio recently, but usually I feel like in the lead up to the draft, there's so much trade chatter and there's less trades in that, which makes sense, right? That like teams are doing their due diligence. But so I always expect fewer trades than I hear about. But this year, because there's a brand new CBA that is implemented 9 days after the draft actually starts, I'm not sure how much this will impact the top 10 necessarily, but I do feel like there could be a little more movement than normal because of that, as teams try to get their asset base straightened out, try to get their picks in order, all that sort of stuff. So I don't know if you feel like that'll be the case, but I this is the first year that since I've actually understood how the reporting versus actual stuff trade game works, that I feel like there could be at least a couple more trades inside the top 10 than a normal season.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of trades. Past, I think the top 20 is where things will get started. It seems to be every year. Top 10 really goes hit or miss. I do think Dallas is going to be trading their pick. Obviously, this isn't super relevant to the Pacers, but in a way it kind of is, because if say Dallas is trading their pick, right? There's somebody that somebody may want. If it's Anthony Black and you say, hey, the Pacers, they don't need Anthony Black to necessarily, because you already have Nembhard, you already have Halliburton. You can kind of make an argument that, they don't need really a third guard like that. And even though Anthony Black's not like necessarily a point guard, that's not necessary. So say Anthony Black's there at 10. You could probably, in a way, I don't know how realistic it is to trade with Dallas or something, but like that kind of stuff matters. Of who's slipping will really impact where and what the Pacers do, because they may say, all right, we like this guy somewhere, and at 7, it's not going to be the same guy they like at 15, but they really may like somebody and say, all right, because this guy's sliding now, we can trade back in. I think the top 10, though, in general, it just won't have that many trades. I've heard, I was talking to somebody last night. They were saying, look, we all saw a bunch of trades coming, but now that there's so much on the table, it probably actually means nothing's going to happen.
That's usually how it is, right? And like the CBA part, I think will affect to kind of step on my own toes of the thing I just said. I think the CBA thing will affect more of the expensive teams, which typically are good teams, which typically pick later in the draft, right? Just to connect all those dots together. But yeah, I'll be fascinated to see how all these moving parts work in tandem and what that means for the Pacers draft, right? Because I've long theorized it could be their spot at 7 is interesting, just because I don't think they can get into the top 4. I guess that any team could do anything, but I don't think they would get into the top 4, and then 5 through whatever is kind of one tier. So I have always surmised that because of the way this draft is shaken out, because of the way it looks like all these teams' goals are colliding, the more likely thing they do is trade back within the top 10, 11, 12, 9, whatever. I'm making up numbers, but you get what I'm saying, versus anything else, just because of the structure of this draft more so than anything. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's my sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think Oklahoma City's a prime candidate too. I mean, they have I don't know the exact number, but they have so many picks. Like they have so many.
You don't know the exact
picks.
number of OKC picks? Does OKC know the exact number of OKC's picks?
No,
it's like 10 million, right?
Between them, New Orleans, and Utah, they might have half the picks, the first round picks ever, to go out in the next 10 years. Like that's what it feels like, at least. But
that's right.
You know, I do think if Oklahoma City, like they say, all right, we're not going to be in contention for a lottery pick unless like things go horribly south with injuries or whatever next year. And even if they are, do they want to? Like, again, the draft is perceived as pretty weak. I think it could be something where they say, all right, we'll give 2 first round picks of next year. We'll give 12 up. They might do it. 3, maybe. Like, you can throw in however many you feel comfortable. I don't think 3 for 5 spots is necessarily even, but I feel like you can do 2, and 2 of those, the 2 most valuable 2024 picks, and boom.
Yeah, there's a lot of permutations, right? And the other backdrop of this that confuses me somewhat, not confuses, I'm not confused about anything. The Pacers can do a million things that would make sense to me. The other part of this too is they want to be good this coming season, right? I said that when talking about all these teams, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, maybe I think the Wizards are like the only team that wants to go downward in the whole NBA right now. Maybe like every other team is trying to get better next year. Utah TBD. So how the Pacers manage their own expectations could be fascinating with these picks as well. Like, do they value a good veteran over an extra pick or something like that? So that's just stuff for them to figure out, but I think that will be a big storyline of this draft for them and every team, is how those pieces all get moved around, how the money is involved. The Pacers uniquely, unlike some of these other teams that want to be good, have cap space to take in contracts, to take in players, to make uneven trades. Obviously the Rockets do too, the Spurs do, some teams also do, but the Pacers are chief among them, and they have the best talent on their team of those groups in Tyrese Haliburton. So I'll be fascinated to see how that sort of impacts what they can do, all sorts of stuff like that. So looking forward to all that. Outside of the top 10, people have intrigue in the Pacers because they can't make 5 picks. They only have 4 now after this Denver trade, but even 4 is probably too many to me. Like 2 or 3 rookies seems like the most they could carry. And if it's 3, one of them is probably a 2-way player. What teams do you see as candidates for maybe pick 12 through 22 that could be trade back candidates for the Pacers using 26 and something else to get into the middle of this first round?
Yeah, and probably a team that would want to buy, right? Like buy up. Because I think Utah could do it, but again, it's kind of the same situation as Indiana. I don't know if that makes them a match. Miami could. Golden State's a very real candidate, and I think Houston too. Actually, one more is probably Brooklyn, where you got, I mean, they have Dorian Finney-Smith, they have Royce O'Neal. In theory, they could move Nick Claxton if they were desperate, but I don't think they're that desperate to get off of him yet, like pending free agency and stuff next year. But I do think they're a candidate. Also, I mean, just as we've been recording, this news just dropped that, I mean, the Clippers and the Wizards and the Celtics are interested in a 3-team trade with Porzingis, Marcus Smart, Marcus Morris. So that could have a lot of impact too of who's moving up. Like, so it's, yeah, I'll read the tweet since I got it. Shams tweeted, sources: Wizards, Celtics, and Clippers are in strong talks, which usually means it's going to happen, on a trade that would send Kristaps Porzingis to Boston, Marcus Morris and draft compensation to Washington, and randomly Malcolm Brogdon to the Clippers. So I do think things like that, like the Wizards could be a team that, hey, they really like somebody at 7. I know that they weren't in that range, but they're one spot behind. They now have some ammo to potentially do that, to get back up one spot. If it's a difference of like, if they're all in on one guy, Cam Whitmore versus like, if they love Asar Thompson, right, they might do it. Like if they think he's there. So that's something to consider too. Yeah,
it's certainly tricky with the talent, the way it's shaken out. And the trouble is with recording this, we're doing this, a couple hours before midnight. Like there could be shakeup even before then. And then it's like, well, maybe some other team is going to do this, or who knows what actually could happen. Such is life with the draft, right? Once every team's done with their workouts and set their board is when this action gets going, as you can see, which is pretty crazy. And the Pacers having 2 2024 firsts now. And by the way, I believe I am correct on the reporting now that we're 10 minutes in and I've gotten more details here. So yes, nailed that one. I'll be fascinated to see what they can kind of do to move around. Like in my head, the people have, I think, just got reported once. The Lakers at 17 is an interesting one. Like they're young, they have some young talent, but not a lot. Like would they just want more bites of the apple potentially? They have been a great drafting team for a while. You were about to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know Max Christie's not going to go anywhere. I think they're more likely to trade back, though, than trade up. I feel like just in general, my philosophy, though, is also if you don't have many assets going forward and the nights you can keep those picks like this year, the odd years, it's 2023. The odd years, for the Lakers, for example, they should be trading back to make up for those trades they've lost out on. So I actually think they should move back. I don't think they're going to move up. But sorry to interrupt that.
One more break here, guys, so I can talk to you about eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. No, you're good. But that is the kind of team that the Pacers should be talking to me, right? Like anyone that is interested in more lesser things because of the way that they've operated for a long time. I would say Brooklyn is in this, but they already have a lot of picks too, so maybe they're not as interesting for this. And perhaps the Pacers could put player assets on the table if they want to move up even higher to get into like 15 late lotto range. I don't know, but it's fascinating to see what teams are going to want more bites of the apple. And this is where the new CBA really gets into the meat of this, because I'm fascinated to see like Denver. Part of the reason they did this stuff with the Pacers is they need rookie contracts now, right? They're going to be running into these aprons. They need the cheap talent now. Even if the player isn't playing for them, it just gives them a chance to fill their team out with young developing talent. Like Peyton Watson's probably going to be in their rotation next year because they need guys like that to step up. So that's why they would do something like this. Perhaps there's other teams interested in that could help the Pacers move around or meander. And that's what makes the draft so fascinating is how do the Pacers attack that or approach that? If they want to move up, there'll be options. If they want to move out, there'll be options. If they want to move back, there'll be options. I don't know, but because of the new CBA and because there's some teams that have different goals, we talked about the Lakers, but there's going to be ways for them to move their asset pool around.
Yeah, and I think they look, if they're like most NBA teams, there's probably multiple guys in the 7 to 16 range that they really like. If you went through just an average mock and found like all the names in that range, they probably like multiple of them too. And that's the beauty of what the Pacers have done, making all these trades throughout the years that have now come into fruition, where you give yourself flexibility every single night. You don't like the options at 7, you can move back. You like the options at 6 and 5, you can move up. You don't like the options at 26, 29, 32, you can change that in any order you want, really, from 20 to 40. There are a lot of options. I'm curious because I know the Pacers had some high-level people watching Cason Wallace go off, I would say, at his pro day at the very end, where he just made, I want to say he made like 20 of 20, or it was more than 20 of 25. It was probably a 21, 22 of 25. It was incredible. And I know they had a lot of high-ranking personnel there at Excel's pro day. Like, I'm curious if they were to trade back for Cason Wallace. I know what I said, they don't necessarily need a guard, but if you could move, like, I think they would rather have that than all these picks that, I forget now, just with the trade, it's thrown me off. But I mean, in theory, those trades in the 20s through 40s, right? And 55.
They have 26 and 40. So they have 2 picks in that range. They have an extra 2024 first now, which is something I have to bake into these trades. They have 55, some young stuff. Yeah, it's fascinating. And they have cap space. Like, they could take in bad salary if it helps them move around too. Like, there's just so much they can do. And it all started with this Denver trade. So yeah, Cason Wallace is really great. I have him ranked in the lottery myself. I think most people do. So I'll be curious where that ends up shaking out or what they end up liking and not liking in this draft. All the intrigues about 7, Richard. What would you do at 7 for the Pacers, assuming the top 6 goes reasonably as most expect?
Yeah, let's just, I'll run through my top 7 mock if you'd be interested. So I'll say it'll be Victor. I know it's a bold take at number
What?
one. I'm trying to be a hot take artist here. I'd say Scoot ends up being the pick.
Hang on. Before you get to Scoot 2, because I have Scoot 2 also, did you see Wemby holding the baseball?
Yeah.
Oh,
his palm ball would be insane. His
I
splitter,
was with
oh
my family.
God.
My family doesn't care about basketball. I was like, look at this. Look at this. This is crazy. It's nuts. If you haven't seen the picture of Wemby throughout the first pitch of the Yankees game, and he's holding the baseball, and it makes the baseball look like
it's
a
like
grape,
when Boban,
like it's tiny. Yeah.
It's like when Boban shook that reporter's hand and it looked like the BK mini hands. Like that's what it looked like to me. But,
it was crazy. All right,
so
continue.
I would say Victor, Scoot, Brandon Miller. That's the top 3. Amen Thompson 4. I think the Pistons end up taking Taylor Hendricks. I think at 6, the Magic take Anthony Black. So, God, that is tough. God, this is really hard. I am going to give them Jarris Walker. I think you look at a team that the Pacers clearly are trying to win. Like, that's not a shock. They progressed their rebuild very quickly, or retooling, I should say. They didn't rebuild, but I think that's gone so smoothly that Jarris Walker's a guy who, in his first, really just his whole rookie contract, he's going to be one of the few positive rookie players. He's going to immediately help the Pacers get to a higher level. Like, he is a ceiling raiser. He's not the same player like one-to-one, but just like you watch the impact of other players across the league. Like Draymond Green is he's the textbook ceiling raiser. I think when you think of ceiling raisers, it's him. Would he have the same impact on a bad team? Probably not. But you put a good team trying to go to title team, yeah, he's your guy. And I think Jarris Walker could have that role where he's so good as a connecting piece on both ends, and he's such a high-level defender that he ends up being somebody who, because he makes everyone around him so much better, I think he has to be the pick. And look, you put him with Rick Carlisle, who knows how to maximize his players and minimize their weaknesses. That's a lot of upside.
I love Jarris. I'm a big fan. It's funny because I'm a big fan of a lot of guys this year, even though I'm like, that's not exactly true. Either way, I have Jarris 7th myself, but in the situation you just described, I have Asar 6th. So I would have to really think about that. But I also think the Pacers would have to think about what they want next year if that scenario you just described is the case, because that's a lot of what you just said of really great fit, connecting ceiling raiser versus, oh my God, this guy's upside's amazing kind of pick, which is telling for what a team's direction is.
I know we're short on time, but could I just pick your brain and kind of present my take on something with Asar? I'm curious why you think he would go 6 beyond the workout being canceled. Like I'm curious.
I have him 6th.
You have him 6th. How come?
I have him 6th on my board. That's not a mock situation.
Gotcha. Okay, because I was going to say I personally I'm not a fan of his game, so I think him canceling his workouts is a smokescreen. I think it's him saving face. That's just
I have high-level creators abound in the top 6. That's pretty much my biggest skill, and I think he can be a creator who can shoot a little bit. I think that's valuable. I understand the risk of the OTE guys, and I don't want to litigate that too much. That would be a great conversation if the Pacers do pick one of the two. But yeah, I think in the situation you said, Walker would make a ton of sense for them. I've thought he makes a ton of sense for them this whole time. Like, I've put him on a lot of the graphics I've made just because I think he's a great pick. I picked him in the Locked On mock draft. Like, I just think he's a wonderful fit. So if it shakes out that way, that would be wonderful for them. Any other pinch points or players in this draft that you're monitoring that you think could have an impact on the rest of the draft, or that the Pacers need to keep an eye on?
I think Bilal Coulibaly's stock is going to be domino. Like, if he goes 9
flying, man. It's flying. Yeah.
Yeah. If he goes 9 to Utah, it changes a lot. I think where Derek Lively goes, that changes a lot, because I think he's somebody, if he doesn't get picked by Dallas, he's probably going in the middle teens, late teens. Nick Smith and Keontae George, I think both their ranges are so wide that they could either push somebody back towards the Pacers being, you said 26 is still there, right? It's still throwing me off. I'm so sorry.
For now. As of the time we're speaking.
Yeah. So that 16 pick range, like after, Derek Lively, for example, or 17 after Bilal, there's a lot that could change, and Nick Smith could either help someone be in that range. Olivier Maxence Prosper could help. Keontae George, like, just looking at where we were a week ago, a lot has changed. I mean, I think there's a lot of guys. Brandon Podziemski would be really cool. I think if I had to pick a guy at 26, I don't think he gets past Memphis, though. So that's where it's tough. You would have to jump them. But if he's not there, Max Lewis could be a good upside play. Dude's got to work a lot on
Tuesday
defense,
or Monday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of fascinating, good players late in this draft too. You know, we both like G.G. Jackson, as you know. We've talked about him in person before. If he's there in the 20s, late teens, whatever, I would be looking at him. I love Noah Clowney as well, but that's unrelated to anything that could truly shift the board. So we'll see. Tonight's going to be fascinating. Big picture, there's a lot of chances for movement for lots of teams because of this new CBA, because of the tiering of this draft. It's pretty unique, and there's a lot of talent. I think we're going to see some stuff going on, and I'll be fascinated to see what the Pacers, who I still think have at least one more move in them just because of the number of picks they have, actually do. Richard, on behalf of our Locked On Network, will be there at the draft. So where can people follow you in your coverage of what's going on in the room? And your job actually is to live stream Jalen Hood-Schifino right to my brain so I can see what my IU guy is doing in there. But really, where can people follow you and what you're going to be covering tomorrow?
Oh, it's funny. The NBA email that they sent me said you have to live stream that. So that is funny. So it's crazy. All on the same page. No, my Twitter's at Mavs Draft. Everything I do will be going through there, as well as Instagram, NBA Draft Film. I'll be posting some stuff, just some cool content I think that you don't see on TV. Whatever I find, I'll be posting there. It's just a little, if you're more wanting that fan side of it. But if you're wanting like the analysis, Twitter's the place.
What was that? If you want analysis, Twitter's the place.
I know the first time that's been said.
I think you're the first person who ever said that. Also, I have to plug this. If you're listening right now, Locked On NBA Big Board, to get you really prepped for the draft. They've been covering this stuff year round and have been crushing it leading up to the draft. A listen for me every single day. You should make it a listen yourself. Richard, thanks so much for the time, man. Everybody, thanks a ton for listening. We're breaking everything down as it happens. I'll be in the St. Vincent Center where the Pacers are making their picks tomorrow. So I'll try to have as much instant content up as I can, but obviously the analysis stuff will have to wait till later in the day. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you soon.